Tony Kibble de Sub Pop Records, Grant C. Dull de Sub Pop Records. What? Tony Kibble de, perdón, Grant, de CSEC Records. Y nos va a moderar Joel Moya de Remezcla. Entonces los invitamos a sentarse. Falta Billy. We're missing Billy. Too many pics. Está tomando muchas fotos. Un aplauso para Billy. Lo vuelvo a presentar para los que no estaban. Billy Gould es el fundador y bajista de Faith No More y fundador de un sello independiente también que se llama Cularo Records. Entonces, bienvenidos. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Y seguimos con Joel. We only have 2 mics.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Gracias a todos los que están presentes. Me llamo Joel Moya, trabajo para el medio digital remezcla.com, del que espero que muchos todos los conozcan y los que no, por favor, visítenos. Pues mira, el formato, como mencionó Camila, voy a hacer una introducción en español y después nos vamos a mover el inglés. Vamos a discutir varios temas de interés y los últimos 10 minutos vamos a abrir el piso porque sé que todos ustedes tienen preguntas para estos individuos. Pues mira, empezamos definiendo lo que es un indie label. Bueno, un indie label es una organización que se encarga de no solamente de producir música, promoverlo, sino también mercadearlo, poner los productos en las disqueras, o sea, en las casas disqueras donde venden discos. Y las disqueras independientes no tienen apoyo de las 3 casas grandes que ya ustedes conocen cuáles son. Y todo esto es como especie como de grassroots. Si nos ponemos a pensar, abrir una disquera en estos tiempos, ahora que estamos en el tiempo, o sea, en la edad digital, donde si nos ponemos a pensar años atrás, cuando el download mató al CD y ahora el streaming está matando al download. Si pensábamos abrir una disquera sería como, oye, o sea, es algo como medio loco, pero en realidad no lo es. Es un negocio de que si tú te aplicas y escuchas mucho de los que van a decir esta persona acá, te puede funcionar. De nuevo quiero introduciendo de nuevo a los panelistas. Tenemos a Grant Dull, que él es fundador de CSEC Record y director creativo. También tiene su nuevo imprint que es Hacia Record y CSEC Film. Tenemos acá a mi lado a Tony Kibble, él es de Sub Pop Record, muchos lo conocen porque fue la disquera que dio a conocer a Nirvana y también se le acredita por matar la carrera discográfica de Jesus and the Mary Chain. Eso está, it's credited, it's on the description. Tenemos a Billy Gould, al que muchos de ustedes ya escucharon, bajista de la banda Faith No More, y también tiene un sello discográfico Cularo Record. Y tenemos a Juan Vanderpoort, viene all the way from Europe, director internacional de PIAS. Y empezamos, how about we start each one of you like giving like a history of your label or the entity that you guys work for, and what's your role?
I missed it. I switched to Spanish translation.
Oh, no, it would be like if you share the history of your label, the entity that you work for, and what's your role?
Oh, sure. I'm the VP of A&R for Sub Pop Records. I've been there for about 16 years, and I think A&R means a lot of different things at different companies. At Sub Pop, it means that I help bring in the artists, I help find the artists that we work with. I act as sort of a main contact throughout their relationship with Sub Pop. But we also like to foster as much communication as possible between everybody who works at Sub Pop and the artists for a lot of different reasons. But a lot of what I do is sort of oversee the creation of the records, and basically project manage to a great extent, just the release of their albums and throughout their campaign. But again, it's not necessarily the way all record labels do it. That's what we do. And I've worked with a bunch of different bands over the years, as you must if you've been anywhere for 16 years. And I guess some folks that maybe people might have heard of down here would include Flight of the Conchords and Sleater-Kinney and the Postal Service and a lot of comedians, David Cross, and that I don't know if that translates very well. Anyway, I'm leaving about 200 bands out of my list, but yeah. I will pass along.
Hi, for those who didn't hear me before, my name is Billy Gould, and I have a record label called Cool Arrow out of San Francisco. It's a very small independent label, and I go to the post office. I do sometimes promotion, sometimes tour booking, pretty much sometimes mixing, sometimes recording. Very small, hands-on with artists, and I've worked with artists from all over the world. Like from Spain, Siete Notas, Siete Colores, Como Sesional Felipe's from Chile, the Biozo Collective from Bosnia, Mexican Dubweiser, and that's me.
Afternoon. I should probably first introduce Piaz, because unlike Sub Pop and obviously Bill, most of you might not know Piaz. 30 years in business, originally started as a distribution company, first just in a few territories in Europe, then pretty much all over Europe. Then moved into being a label as well, and now pretty much do everything in between as well. In the main, we work with artists in three ways, either as a label, whereby we do pretty much everything except for management, A&Ring it, putting them in studios, all the creative decisions, up until releasing the record and promoting and marketing it. There's a few bands you might know on the label are Pixies, Editors, Roisin Murphy, Soulwax, Too Many DJs, those bands. Then we have a pretty big and very exciting label licensing division. It's labels that we co-fund. Depends a little bit on their needs, to which extent we get involved. We're certainly involved in a much bigger way than just distribution. All the creative decisions, all the A&R and working out videos, deciding on singles, that's still done by the labels. But next to funding and everything that comes after that, we basically are handling. And there's labels in there like Infectious, All J is a band you must know, Bella Union, who have bands like Beach House, we share with Sub Pop or Father John Misty. Mute is in there, New Order, again a band I'm sure you know. And the list is quite long, and there's also a few individual artists, not necessarily tied into a label, Eels, Interpol, they all work with us on that basis. And then we also do distribution for a very long list of labels, but where we only do distribution. A few exceptions aside, where we get a little bit more involved, but generally, whether it's Beggars, Domino, Warp, Sub Pop in quite a few markets, Ipecac, who released the last Faith No More album, Bill's label, we do as well. The list is quite long. So it's those three areas we basically we get involved in. Much shorter on what I do. We have a pretty big international network. We have 15 offices around the world and about 300 or more than 300 people working for us. 130 in the UK and then about 170 elsewhere. What I oversee is that network of offices and then the 15, 16 people we have in the UK office coordinating all of that. So that international team and then the international network. That's all we do, or that's all I do.
Hello, my name is Grant Duell from ZZK Records. ZZK is a small independent label from Buenos Aires. Started from a weekly party called ZZek. The label is 8 years old. We now have artists in 6 Latin American countries. We basically work with the artists from the conception of their album to the delivery of the album to the market, trying to connect all the different points in between. We work on the promotion side, the marketing side, communication, licensing, distribution, just about every aspect of label services or an independent label team. And we've brought artists to the public eye like Chancha Villa Circuito, Frick Stylers, Nicola Cruz, La Yegros, and some other ones. And we're now getting into maybe different areas, non-electronic stuff, working with a band from the Pacific coast of Ecuador and Colombia called Rio Mira. And I'm also starting to produce documentaries from ZZK Films. So that's my world.
So we are experiencing like a lot of changes in the music industry. Like today, it was announced that Amazon is opening their own streaming service. Welcome, welcome to the streaming service world. Now, can indie labels survive the digital age? And what are you guys doing in order to keep up, to adapt to changes in such a hostile environment?
I don't know if I would describe it as a hostile environment. It's different and change is scary, but like with anything, there's an opportunity that presents itself with that change as much as there is a crisis. So for us, one of the exciting things is, and part of the reason why I wanted to come here and meet people and learn about the Colombian music scene, thank you, is because of these changes and the prevalence of digital music services as a core part of our business now, we're suddenly vastly more aware of the audience that our artists have in South America. And that wasn't the case 5 years ago. So it's almost opened up a whole new world for us. Before Spotify started telling us that there were this many thousands of people listening to this record in Bogota or Buenos Aires or Mexico City, we weren't really paying much attention at all. It was difficult to sell physical records. Physical distribution was an impossible task for us in these markets, and suddenly suddenly it's possible. So that's a great opportunity. These are thousands, these are millions of customers that we didn't have access to before. So yes, there's shrinking revenue from selling CDs, but we're also selling more LPs than ever. And we are making money from streaming. There's quite a bit of money actually being made from streaming, and quite a bit of it is actually being paid to the artists. That's all I will say on that. But it is, I don't see it as a big negative. This new market, it's just different, and you have to be alert, and you have to be willing to adjust your strategies and pay attention. So paying attention to South America is a way that we can grow our business, even though we aren't selling as many CDs in the United States as we were 5 years ago.
A changing world where we have to adapt, but I think in the last 10, 15 years, in very many ways, we as a business have had to learn how to do that. And I think we're constantly adapting. There's no sort of, I think I want to add to what Tony said actually. Some things are not developing in the right direction, other things are opening up. South America is hugely exciting for us, and it's not the only area that is. It's not only the inside you mentioned. We've managed in the last couple of years to put people on the ground in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina purely on the basis of streaming growing. And actually our partner in Iberia and in Latin America, who's in the room as well, is going even further than that. So the market is developing, was developing regardless of us actually focusing on it. And by doing that, we're focusing on it, we're pushing even further. So that's adapting. It's not all doom and gloom at all. But it is challenging at times because I think whatever we do in this business, we owe it to our artists first and foremost. We owe it to our staff members as well to make this work financially as well. And in an environment that constantly changes, that's easier said than done. But I think everyone here is managing to do it, and there will be a lot of indie labels that manage to do so. I hope all of them. I certainly don't think it's the end of indie, and unfortunately also not the end of major record companies. Personally, I think the biggest challenge is handling the workload, because it's not that it's all changing, it's all growing in a sense. We're still doing everything we did before and more. And I told you how many people we have working for us, and trust me, they're all doing overtime. They're all fucking busy. Sorry for swearing. So, a few challenges, but nothing we can't overcome.
So, ZZK was born in the digital age, and so we've always kind of had to rely on streaming or downloads as one of our primary sources or sources of income. And another thing that we've been able to do over the years is just look for different avenues of revenue. For example, ZZK for a long time was involved in touring and management and booking, and now we're getting back into live shows. We're being asked for like label nights or showcases, and so we're not just depending on selling records. We're kind of like diversifying our production and our output into different areas of the industry, and so it keeps you on your feet. If you're going to earn fractions of a centavo on a song, then you're going to have to look for other ways to make the label work. So that's one of the challenges that we've had, but also one of the ways that we've been able to think outside the box and to keep creating and to keep producing and to keep looking for ways to make the label work.
Okay. So the next topic, it was a conversation during lunch. We were talking about the necessity of developing like more people to work in the music, in the Colombian music scene, such as managers, PR, photographer, videographer, people that would understand how the music works. So, you guys, what is the role of labels developing a music market? So what would you tell the audience over here? Like, what should they do?
I feel like there might be some parallels in Sub Pop's story. When Sub Pop began, we're based in Seattle, Washington, and it was founded in 1988. This is all pre-internet being a real factor in anything for music, anyway, and there wasn't much of the touring bands didn't come to Seattle. It was remote. It was inaccessible to a certain extent. There wasn't enough of a reason to get there. So they developed a scene in that vacuum where bands were just playing to each other, and that's where the grunge scene erupted from. And that, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, Nirvana, and a raft of other bands that deserve more credit than they receive. But part of that community. That I honestly don't believe what happened to those bands could have happened without everything else that rallied around it. And that includes, I think, Sub Pop's founders, these two gentlemen, Jonathan and Bruce, and their insane, ridiculous sense of humor and quest to conquer the world with their, with the grunge scene of the Northwest and all their bullshitting and made up stories about all these bands. But there was also this, there's a photographer named Charles Peterson, and all those iconic photos that people look at of Kurt Cobain and Chris Cornell and these kids crowd surfing, all those amazing black and white photos, he took those, and those were used in album art, they were used in posters, they were used in NME to help build this myth of this insane scene that existed in Seattle. There were a host of illustrators these amazing illustrators that all came out of Washington. They all went to school there. Guys like Charles Burns, who made underground comics like Hate and 8 Ball. Jim Woodring. There was a whole universe of illustrators, photographers, marketing insane weirdos, and graphic designers, and all of these people and publicists who all came together and sold this story. But I mean, and I don't want to take away from the importance of the songwriting and the performance, because it really does all come back to those bands and the fact that they were playing for each other first and foremost, and they developed a real community, and then that was sold to the rest of the world, for better or for worse. But I believe that's possible anywhere, and I not only believe it's possible anywhere, I believe it should be happening everywhere. And it's important for communities to connect and just support their art scene. And I think there's this amazing. I'm just getting to know this community, and I'm already sensing it, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Actually, I thought he said something really interesting, and I think he's right. When you talk about all these photographers and all these other people that come around with part of a music scene happening, technology is just one small part of it. Really, you want to have an ecosystem of a lot of talented people. And the reason and the way that happens is artists make your art good to begin with, make it solid and attract people who are interested in what they're doing. And there's a synergy that happens there. And wherever the technology, which is going to change 10 times more in the next 15 years, if there's a core of artists together that are all feeding into this, it's going to find itself expression, I think.
I agree with both the saying. I think that sort of core magic needs to happen within a band. Like, people need to connect, and people around it need to connect. What we offer as a label, as I said earlier, we work with artists on different levels in a way. So what we offer is different for every artist. But what we definitely offer everyone, and where most bands will struggle with, is scale. I think most of the artists I deal with, we release worldwide, exceptions aside when it comes to America. You need to have around you, from photographers, you need all of that around you. You need to sort of take the first steps yourself. But you will get to a point where the world is a big place, and to have that sort of insight in every market, to have that know-how that you need in every situation, that's hard for any band to amass over to do on the back of one album. Basically, we release 200 albums a year where we control. That sounds too controlling. Where we do marketing, promo, where we do pretty much everything. That comes with some experience, with some know-how. And a lot of bands know what they need to do to a certain extent, and I think that's where we step in to then guide it further. The magic doesn't happen with us, but the guidance does come in with us at some point. And that's generic, but that's as good as I can subscribe it.
I have nothing to add. Nothing to add? Well, so difficult times call for creative measures. In 2015, CCK Record, they launched an Indiegogo campaign. It was, thank God, it was successful. Out of that campaign, there are 3 documentaries. Can crowdfunding change the music industry or the way like record label do business when it comes to funding?
Yeah, I mean, in 8 years of ZZK, we've crowdfunded, I think, 5 or 6 times. So it's now just become a part of our ecosystem almost. Like, I don't want to have to always rely on crowdfunding, but it's become such an integral part of our way to kind of keep things going, to keep projects moving, and to keep ideas happening, and to keep the label just functioning, that I think crowdfunding is an essential part for an independent artist or an independent label to call on their community in certain situations, not in all situations, but definitely in certain situations where you've built an audience and that audience connects to your story, and that story is something that inspires a lot of people. And if you're able to get that story out and actually deliver on what you're setting out to do, then it can be a very powerful tool. And ZZK has thankfully had a good run on building a community and using crowdfunding as a way to keep the label moving. We're actually in a couple of days going to launch another crowdfunding campaign. So it's almost like it's just a part of our kind of like stream of where we're going to make any money these days to keep funding these very ambitious ideas.
And what can you guys predict about the future of music? 10 years from now, what's the panorama? Let's get into the Walter Mercado mode.
10 years from now, okay. No, I can't. I think the next 2 or 3 years, nothing much will change, personally. You know, streaming will grow, but I don't think it will explode. Hopefully we get rid of freemium, but I also don't think that will happen overnight. Physical will go down, but it won't disappear. I think it will, and there will be new technologies and new challenges, but generally I don't expect a great revolution in the next 2 or 3 years, nor can I predict one. I hope we get rid of mood playlists, because I wanted to swear again, I hate those things, but anyway, no, that's a joke. I really don't think the next 2 or 3 years we'll see major changes. What I do notice with us, and actually with a few other labels, is because of streaming, the world is opening up, and I think a lot of labels, whilst we already invested a lot in globally in the people we have, we're pushing way further, and everyone, Sub Pop, all the labels we work with are doing that as well. But that's also no great big change. So no, ask me in 2 years whether I know what happens in 6, but I can't tell you now.
I think the one thing that's going to change, I think is an inevitability, is the technology will improve and hopefully sound files will sound better. I think that has to happen. I think that we're basically a baseline of what's acceptable as sound quality, and it has to get better.
I think that's an admirable goal. I hope that's the case. I'm hoping for a CD renaissance, because I'm sick of making LPs. They're really hard, they melt too easily, takes too long. I like a CD. But I know that's maybe controversial, but I'm serious. But in 10 years, yeah, I can predict that I believe we will still be a record label. We will probably have wildly different functions, but we will be working to support the artists that we work with in whatever way that we can, whatever way that they need, which is sort of the one constant throughout the course of our history, is we just fill in the gaps to help artists reach the audience they want to reach. And however that happens, we're game to try to figure it out.
Do you see more brands stepping into your shoes? Like, let's say Converse, with Converse Robert Tracks, Red Bull with the Red Bull Music Academy, where they have developed artists, they also help those artists release music, and Pepsi is also another example. They have Green Label.
I don't so much view them as competing. I'm troubled by it. I mean, I get why music gives cool points to these corporations, and I understand why they want to use it. I understand why, and we're certainly grateful for placements
when we get them in TV shows and commercials for our artists that are willing to do that. We work with, part of the reason I think some bands choose to work with us is we're very, very, very okay with them not allowing any licensing at all. A lot of our artists aren't comfortable with it. But personally, I don't have a problem with it. I get a little bit more fidgety about some of the other things that go on. But you know, I actually applaud a lot of the stuff Red Bull does. I think the Music Academy is a really cool thing. The 30 days shows that they do in New York and LA they're adventurous. They support cool artists. They actually actively try to teach them not only how to market themselves, which, you know, no disrespect to this forum and this panel of people trying to hopefully share some of those insights, but they have actually maybe been one of the only effective companies to figure out how to help bands be more creative in their music, and that it's hard to shit on that, you know. So yeah, but again, there's a lot of weird. Some of the streaming company stuff freaks me out. I don't like the exclusives deals. Not because it interferes with our relationships with bands, you know, like the Frank Ocean type stuff that we've talked about a little bit outside of this panel, but because I feel like it undermines consumers' relationships with the streaming services. It's hard to imagine, you know, a universe where everybody has to subscribe to 5 or 6 different streaming systems because they want to have access to all the different content. We'll end up in a more Netflix, Amazon type universe, and I think that will be a lot more difficult. And I think it's a big ask of people to, you know, to have to do that. I like an even playing field and all the music available everywhere, and I don't know. Maybe that's off topic.
I mean, the one thing with branding that doesn't seem to bother me is when it is tied into live events, festivals, because that's kind of part of a musical ecosystem that's you know, pretty important for artists. But I think with music and music sales, that personally scares me a little bit. That's just my opinion.
I don't know. Of all the artists I want to work with, I don't think any of them will be tempted to sign with a brand. And that list is very, very long of the artists I would want to, or we would want to work with. I don't really know what they add. With all due respect to some, like Red Bull, have tried are doing, but I don't really know if it's not. I think if you would list what labels offer, if you would take into account the commitment they make long term, it's all things I don't really know if you get with a brand. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe I don't have anything so sensible to say on the topic. But I did want to add one thing in relation to brands, and based on what both Bill and Tony said before. So maybe a little bit philosophical, but what I liked about the vinyl resurgence is that people seem to value something we didn't think they would still value. And I think it's going to be in another year or two, and then maybe that's over. But if we as a business manage to find a way of people valuing, and not just people, Joe Public, but also all the players out there, the Deezers of this world, if we would find a way of valuing, of having everyone value music a little bit more, then I think that is going to be our silver lining. And somehow I don't see that work so well with brands. I think the valuing of music versus teaming up with brands, it's counterintuitive, I think.
But the one thing with corporations stepping in, and it's kind of similar, at least from an independent label perspective, to how majors, look at it, or I don't know how they look at it, but there's a certain threshold that has to be met before it's good business, and that's just the realities of the size of their machinery, and there's nothing ethically compromising about that. That's just the reality of it. Whereas I think, for sure in the case of Zizek and Sub Pop, and I imagine it's the case for you as well, like you're dealing with artists that are largely at the ground level. They're starting with 1,000 fans, and maybe they've sold a couple hundred
things on Bandcamp or however they've gotten stuff out. And frankly, there aren't a lot of corporations or major labels that are beating down the doors of those bands. There's not a lot of, that's the niche that I think we fill in. And there aren't even, honestly, a lot of managers that step in that early. There are some, for sure, but there's not a lot. And I think that if there is anything that's, as far as the ecosystem of the music industry as a whole, where indie labels really, are important, it's in that they can provide that support system and that knowledge. I very much see that as part of Sub Pop's role. Again, in the Seattle music community, we try to be as engaged as humanly possible with just sharing whatever we can with as many musicians and also our fellow labels. We're all, I don't think anybody up here views each other as competition. I think I'm a firm believer in the rising tide lifting all the boats, and we need to pass on as much information and wisdom as we can, because we're all in this together, and we're all fighting a good fight to trying to get musicians' music heard by more people, and so that these people can survive off of the art they create.
And you guys have been around for a while in the music industry. What will be your key of success for anyone here who's probably in the next month, 3 months, or maybe a year, they're gonna launch the next big indie label in Colombia. So key of success.
I mean, it's all about passion, and it's all about hard work. It's all about dedication. It's all about relationships. It's all about trust. Basic pillars of humanity, so to speak. Like any industry, it's all about how engaged you are in your work and how passionate you are about what you're trying to grow. And so I'd say, if you found something that you're really passionate about, and you have a core of people, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 50 or 100, as in some of these cases we talked about with photographers and graphic designers and illustrators, because that's very real to these record labels and these emerging scenes. Then I'd say go for it. Give it your all and work hard and sleep a little and party hard and see what happens.
So my number one tip is listen to Grant. I think he did that moving to Buenos Aires. I don't know to which extent you had worked in the business, how much experience you had, but you've zero, but clearly have been very successful. So I would definitely talk to him. I would also like to talk to you. I'm here for 3 days. I can give a very long answer, but I think we'd rather have a dialogue. We speak a little bit about what you struggle with here, because I understand there's managers, there's agents, there's there's ways of playing live here, and clearly there's something missing as well. But I'm not going to sit here and give you the ultimate advice, but I would like to have a chat with you and figure out how we can do that. So come up to me after this, and let's meet up the next 2 days.
I think that was an interesting answer, actually. I think a lot of it is every situation is different, and there's always different needs and different strengths and weaknesses. And finding a partner to talk with, speak with, and knock heads together is always really productive.
Cool. Then one more last topic. Going back to Frank Ocean, and also Frank Ocean released his last album, Blonde. He used to be with Def Jam Record. Def Jam is a subsidiary of Universal. Before Blonde, he released a audiovisual album, and that album was released under Universal. What would be the benefit of a mainstream artist, a big artist, to work with an indie label, with a smaller label. Also, Radiohead applies as well. They've done a couple of stuff on their own.
I mean, the Frank Ocean one is kind of an interesting example because I think what I would normally say, the advantage of an indie label is that there's, at least in our case, there's artistic freedom. There's, complete creative control and approvals over everything, every aspect. And you're working with, the artists that we end up working with are all like-minded. It's a community. We very much work as a family. We tend to share the same political beliefs. We tend to share the same interest in human rights and ending homophobia and ending misogyny. And, we just share a lot of social and political goals. And I think a lot of artists find comfort in that. But also, I think mainly it's the creative control. But in the case of Frank Ocean, Universal let him make a visual album. That's credit to Universal, they kind of let that kid got away with murder, really. Which, again, more power to him too, so.
Yeah.
It kind of what Tony was saying, it kind of just depends on what the artist needs. If the artist like Frank Ocean doesn't really need a label, then he's got that weight and that depth already, that audience to just do it himself. I kind of figured where is the artist in their career and what do they need, and if that label can provide a service or a community or some help them grow, then a label still could be a good option.
Bueno, right now we're gonna open up the floor. Ahora vamos a recibir preguntas de todos ustedes y en caso de que no se cubran todas las preguntas, vamos a estar aquí hoy, mañana y también el viernes. Así que si nos ven al pasillo, you're more than welcome to grab us. So, a ver.
Hello. My question is mainly for Tony, and it's two questions. The first, I think, was already answered because earlier we had a talk with a guy who works from Deezer, and he said that CDs are going to disappear in 10 years. And I was like, maybe not, or that's not my wish. And the question is about how is CDs selling going, and is it profit? Is it giving you profit right now to sell CDs? And I think CDs there's nothing that sounds better than a CD. So in my opinion, CDs should be here for a long time. And the other question is, how did you get to work with a South American band, CSS? And because that was like 10 years ago, and you said that you didn't know about South America before 5 years ago. Those are my two questions.
Is that one working? No. Okay, so first the CD question. I'll try to keep it short, but I have a very long theory for why, and a lot of reasons why it's not just a flippant, I wish CDs would come back, I have a nostalgic thing for them. I agree. I think that CD audio quality has been much maligned over the years, and I think especially relative to all of the other digital formats that people are mass consuming, the CD is light years better. And what I don't like about, and one of the things that I loved about vinyl when I first started collecting vinyl, 20-something years ago, was I could go and I could buy records for 50 cents, 10 cents, $1, and I'd find all these great old records, and I got turned on to whole scenes of music, and I just learned about so much because it was so cheap. and you could get them at thrift stores, you could get them at bookstores. They were just everywhere, and nobody cared about them. And there was stuff that wasn't available on CD. You know, it was just the only way you could even get it, and so there was this hunting. Now that's almost the way it is with CDs. You know, there's a ton of stuff on CD that has never been pressed on vinyl, that isn't up on Spotify, it isn't up on Deezer, it isn't up on iTunes. There's tons of music that is only available on CD right now, and CDs are now the thing that are 10 cents to $1. And I see something really that appeals to, you know, the class warfare advocate that is inside of me. I love a thing with a cheap price point. And I like the discovery of it. I hate that the vinyl scene right now is completely saturated with, you know, super ridiculously, and I'm guilty of making it because our artists want to do it. People want to buy them. I can't not make them, but I think it's absurd to spend $30 on a record. I think, you know, I really appreciate making something valuable that people want to cherish and collect. But when I read surveys about 80% of people who buy LPs never opening them, it grosses me out. I feel like I might as well be selling figurines that have a download code on the bottom of them, which again, I'm not averse to doing if that's what people want us to do. But it doesn't feel like, I don't know, you know, it bothers me. And as more and more people need to press more and more things, the wait time at plants is crazy. It takes 3 to 4 months to turn a record around. It's inaccessible to small bands. We're fortunate that we make so much vinyl that we have preferential treatment at plants. But if you're, you know, a punk band just getting started and want to make your own record, be prepared to wait 6 months for your record to come back. Or you can buy a CD duplicating machine and make yourself a bunch of CDs with some cool hand-drawn art and be ready to go that night. And that, to me, is totally punk as fuck and is what we should be cherishing.
I also want to add something. Remember the experience of going to a store, waiting for a record to drop, buying the record, going home, opening the record, playing the record on your CD player, and then looking at the art at the same time. So that's quite an experience. That digital will never be able to replicate that.
And then I'll be really quick with the second part of your question. CSS, there was a gentleman who used to import Sub Pop records to Brazil. He'd order maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and he'd just buy, you know, a couple hundred records, and then he would go around and sell them to record stores. And he worked for a Brazilian label called Trauma that put out the CSS record in Brazil. And he sent the record to us. He's like, hey, I thought you guys might like this. And and kind of tying it back into the first part of the question, it was a CD. He mailed me a CD, and I played it, and I totally fell in love with it. And the artwork, there's all these pictures of these super rad Brazilian, like I remember Love Fox, the singer, her arm was broken, and she again looked punk as fuck in this photo in the record, and their songs were super weird and crazy, and I loved it. And then it was really fortunate that they ended up being this fantastic live band, because I had never seen them, I had no idea. I purely signed them off of that record, and I'm super grateful, because they are some of my favorite people that I've ever met, and it's a crime and really something I'm kind of ashamed of, that I've not been able to find, that I feel like I haven't looked hard enough to find anyone else from South America to work with, because working with them was amazing. I won't say it wasn't without some drama, not because of the band was always fantastic, but like there was a lot of drama surrounding that band, which I think is pretty publicly documented. It's a good read if you ever want to read about some really, really crazy, fucked up music industry stuff. Those kids had a rough time.
Thank you. In these years, we have 3 major labels: Universal, Sony, and Warner. Yeah, thank you. And it's possible in a future, do you believe exists a new major label in a future?
Was the question whether there's a possibility of a fourth major label? No.
No.
I don't know, but I think 2 rather than 4. I think the trend is not up but down. Everyone agree? Yes, everyone agree.
Okay, this is for Tony. Throughout the years, all the covers, all the image, all the design of the Sub Pop records are so special, are very special. I know that Sasha Bar is one of the guys that is into the design. I want to know what's like the idea of the record label, between the record label and the artist, to bring a very special cover, because all of them are so special for me. I think that is like a casting. If you need to have a very good cover, or maybe let's try another stuff. I don't know.
I agree completely, and thank you very much, because I was feeling bad that I felt like I kind of glossed over the graphic designers in the important music community I described earlier. But people like Sasha Bar, we have 4 full-time graphic designers. I mean, it's like a tenth of our entire workforce is just designing stuff for Sub Pop. And from day one, it's been a core focus of us that it should look good, and that we care as much about the aesthetics of the things that we make. We want everything to look worth owning, you know. And also we're just, we're into art, so why not support it when we can? And and Jeff Kleinsmith, who runs our art department and has for over 20 years, is that me? Is largely to credit for the consistency of our output, I think. But one thing that has been a difficult line to walk, I think, when it comes to that is, I mentioned earlier that we give our artists complete creative control. And I think one of the personal difficulties I've had over the years is not every band necessarily has the same aesthetic sense that our art department does, or that I have. And we will always let them have their way. And in my opinion, there are some weak spots in our album covers over the years. And I'm not going to say they're all the band's faults, but they are. They're all the band's faults. Sometimes it's hard to convince them that the best illustrator in their 10th grade art class doesn't mean it's actually a guy who should be making your album cover. But that happens. Probably a couple times a year it happens. But thank you. I don't want to undermine that compliment. I'm really, really lucky and proud to work with our art department. They're fantastic.
Okay. My question is for Grant. Here. Yeah. First of all, I'm a really fan of your work with CCK, and I have a question. It's a very down-to-earth question. Your label works with Latin American artists, but for us Latin Americans, like having the passport of a Latin American country might not be the easiest way to travel around the world. I have seen the tours that you have coordinated for Chancha Via Circuito or Nicola Cruz. What advice would you give to our Latin American labels to travel abroad or to manage an international tour? Because I think we Colombians have had some negative experience with our passport. It was harder before some years, but we still carry a very negative background in the diplomacy and foreign policies movement.
I understood the first part of your question, which is how did a Latin American artist travel around the world? The second part of your question I didn't understand.
It wasn't the second part, it was a context.
A commentary. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. So we started very differently than most artists, because we started as a collective. and we started touring together, and we got early one booking that kind of paved the way to go play, and then we started just to basically book as much shows as we can and as many cities as we can for little or no money or some money, but just go and play. Just go and play and create an audience and bring your music to different cities, et cetera, et cetera. We did that for years, and we didn't make any money for years. And then finally, I think the curve caught up a little bit, and the artists started to develop their own audiences so that the collective, ZZK Collective or ZZ Collective, didn't have to tour as a group, and all the artists could start touring individually, and we would help them when their album came out, kind of start to connect some dots. And so eventually agents and managers and people started helping us with that. So, I mean, my advice would just to be, try to find one show that helps pay your costs over there, and then try to tour as much as you can, and sleep wherever you can, and eat whatever you can, travel on the worst Ryanair airplanes you can, just to make sure that you get around as much as you can. But it takes years, really. It takes Chancha Via Circuito for 3 or 4 tours made no money. But eventually, after building his audience, he was finally able to create a demand and to get an agent and to get a manager involved, that now people are asking for him. So every story is different, every artist is different, but I would say just hit the road and try to create a following first online, and then try to have that translate into a show, into a booking.
Hi. I have 2 questions. Do you think that Colombia could be a good market for your companies? And also, if you hear a Colombian musician that is good enough to be part of your company, would you be willing to work with him?
Is this for me?
All of you.
All of us. Absolutely, 100%. Colombia has always been a major source of inspiration for me. When I first started DJing like 10 years ago, a lot of the stuff that I was DJing was like early Sidestepper or Choke It Down, Bomba Stereo. Like, I think Colombia has so much to offer, and I personally, as a record label, like, yes, I would absolutely work with Colombian artists.
Likewise, absolutely. I think this event itself actually proves that there is room to do more in Colombia. The talent is there as well, so yeah.
Colombia.
Absolutely not. No.
Para mí, que vengo ya del lado de medio, sí, hay muchos proyectos súper interesantes. Yo soy de República Dominicana, y hasta que no empecé a escuchar cumbia y vallenato fue que me di cuenta que la mayoría de los merengues que yo amo son adaptaciones de vallenato y de la cumbia. Y claro, o sea, si hay músicos acá, estaría feliz de escuchar su propuesta.
Well, first of all, forget my bad English. I like to ask, ¿la puedo decir en español? Pues quería intentar en inglés, voy a intentar en inglés, si de pronto me puedes ayudar un poquito. With all the development of tech, internet, internet tech, technology, and all these new tech technologies, seems to be that industry is going to have a whole change in the product. No.
Si quieres decirlo en español y yo se lo puedo traducir.
Bueno, con todos estos desarrollos tecnológicos que se dieron de internet y de toda esta tecnología pues nueva, parecía que el mercado iba a transformarse y parecía que, digamos, las grandes
los grandes sellos iban a desplomarse y parecía que todo iba a cambiar y que todo iba a ser color de rosa pues para los artistas. En cuanto a la producción, pues eso fue una realidad muy clara, porque tuvimos la oportunidad de tener estudios de producción, pues, digamos, de calidad mediana en nuestras casas. Eso era algo inconcebible hace unos pues, bastantes años. Pero digamos, en el punto de vista de la distribución, no lo es en absoluto. De hecho, fracasó, porque la distribución sigue estando centralizada pues ya no en los mismos 3, pero sí en los mismos 100. Entonces yo quisiera saber cómo como artistas podemos tratar de desarrollar una estrategia de distribución exitosa y que nos pueda facilitar, digamos, sin tener que relacionarnos con grandes industrias o con sellos de mediana categoría, sino poderlo hacer nosotros mismos. La distribución de nuestro propio trabajo, me gustaría saber qué consejos nos pueden dar para eso. Me gustaría saberlo.
Oh, the question is advice on music distribution, because he had a home studio and it kind of failed. The distribution of the stuff he was making, it kind of failed. So, where should we go? Where he should go for distribution? ¿Distribución digital o física?
Distribución del trabajo, en general.
Okay,
En general.
Well, I'm not an expert on South America, but I can tell you in North America, and again, it depends if you're looking to make money or you're looking for exposure. Those are two different strategies, because I would advise if you're just looking for maximum exposure, you should upload everything to SoundCloud, and really work the SoundCloud social networking functions, because it can work wonders with their algorithms and getting your songs placed in feeds next to other artists if you really engage with the platform. But there's also a thing called Bandcamp, and Bandcamp is amazing. They are an incredible resource, and I know many bands in the U.S. who completely rely on Bandcamp for all of their distribution, and it's an effective partner. And if you get to a certain level of success, I think it's worth engaging with platforms like TuneCore and CD Baby. You should check out their websites and see if their business model makes sense for you. And then at another level, there's companies like The Orchard who are here. I think you need a kind of decent amount of sales to really step up into that type of a distribution system. But that would be my first suggestions. Oh, and YouTube. I would say upload your stuff to YouTube, for sure.
Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Colombia. My question is, how or which is the way to send your works and that you can really hear it? Because many times there are a lot of people between you and the works we send, and many of works you never heard it. How or which is the real channel to send you music and that you really hear it? And that will be good if we get some advice or something, but if you listen to them, that will be so nice. Which is the real way to send you works?
If I'm understanding you correctly, how to send me a demo, and this is for sure the best way to send me music, and I think it's probably maybe the way most people at record labels like to get it. I would suggest I listen to everything that gets sent my way, everything. I do not respond to probably 99% of it, because in order to have time to listen to even the first 30 seconds of every song that gets sent to me, it's impossible to write a thoughtful reply. Because I don't know if I get more or less than you might think, but I get probably depending on the day, like maybe 30 things a day. But my email address is TonyK, TONYK, at subpop.com. It's best if you have a SoundCloud and send me a link to a SoundCloud player, because then I don't have to keep track of a million downloads, because those do sometimes get lost, I have to be honest. But I listen to every SoundCloud link almost without fail. So yeah, that's the best way. And I think too, if you want to move up the ranks, how quickly I listen to something, it's good if you include in your email, and again, I think this is good advice no matter who you're sending music to. I don't want to feel like I'm part of a blanket list, so don't send it to more than one person at a time. That's a sure recipe to go to the bottom of my stack if I'm one of 10 email addresses. And also, I want to know that you actually know what we do. And so it doesn't, a short email is always appreciated, but something that says, hey, I know I'm a fan of Sub Pop. I've liked this and this and this thing that you've done there. I think it would be really amazing to work with you. Here's some music. I'd give it a listen if you have a minute. It doesn't have to be much, but just something that shows that you actually know who I am. Because a lot of what I get sent is lyrics from high school kids who think I'm gonna get a pop star to sing a song that they wrote in English class. Like, there's crazy stuff gets sent in. And everything in between that, and people actually appropriate for Sub Pop Records. So, but anyway, that's my tips.
Igual esto aplica para los medios. Cuando escriben un email, o sea, por favor, por lo menos envíen un link para una o dos fotos en alta resolución, una biografía, y si nos cuenta una historia, o sea, de dónde viene y por qué tu música es especial. O sea, porque igual de mi lado recibo muchos emails diarios de muchos proyectos que son interesantes. Igual no puedo contestar todo, o igual, o sea, tampoco no tenemos muchas veces el bandwidth para reseñar todo, pero sí. También es el mismo método. Mi email es joel@remezcla.com. Siempre estoy ahí. O también me pueden seguir en las redes sociales. Igual. Creo que tenemos espacio para una pregunta más.
Hey guys, thank you for your information and welcome to Colombia. My question is short. How often us new artists should release new music? Either it's digital or physical. I mean, how often we should release new music? Thank you.
For one artist, or I don't know if there's a rule, is there?
Exactly, no rules. Every band is different. You should always release your best work. And so I don't think we should say every 6 months, because that might be too challenging. But I think everyone here does try to keep artists' careers active in between releasing albums, whether it's touring, whether it's doing other things. I think it is important to be visible and active as an artist, but not necessarily release music at regular intervals. But it is one of the best questions today, I must say.
No, there's no right answer, but what we've been doing recently is we've been releasing a single and then an album and then maybe some remixes. So kind of like always have a steady stream of, don't have just one idea, have kind of think three steps ahead of what you want to do. So I'm going to release this, and then I'm going to release this, and then I'm going to release this, and then try to think a bit more long term than just now. Also, a lot of the artists that I work with are very impatient to get their music out, and sometimes I tell them, tranquilízate, we're going to work together, we're going to start connecting these points, we're going to make a music video, we're going to tell a story. So maybe also think about what assets and what narrative and what other things you're going to release with this music, not just merely an MP3 or a YouTube or a stream.
one thing I could say as a musician, where I was on a process where you release a record, then you go on tour, and when the touring's over, it's like, okay, guys, time to do a new record, and you get this momentum that does work when you tour a lot, and you have to be very careful as a band member, to keep the ultimate priority that the band is healthy internally. And think long-term, nothing is worth keeping a momentum if you start getting divisions in the band, because not everybody's ready. So never feel like you have to do something quickly for your career because it'll help your career. Because if it creates divisions in the band, then it isn't good for your career.
Bueno, hello. Bueno, sí. Bueno, de nuevo quiero darle las gracias a todos los que vinieron. Gracias a M3, gracias a Colombia 3.0 por hacer esto. Recuerden que todos ustedes son jóvenes, tienen el poder y tienen energía para hacer el cambio. Todos tenemos un amigo que es diseñador gráfico, un amigo que es fotógrafo, tenemos un amigo que es músico. Si todos se juntan con mucha voluntad y dedicación, pueden hacer el cambio. Recuerden que ustedes tienen la llave para afianzar el puesto de Colombia en la industria de la música global. Así que, y sí a la paz. Todos unidos por la paz de Colombia. Gracias.